Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we are going to be looking at a news article out of Screen Rant that basically has some interview quotes from Zack Snyder, which I think really kind of shed a little bit of a light on maybe how Warner Brothers views the Snyder Cut of Justice League as opposed to maybe how they advertised how they viewed it. And this is again kind of the smoke and mirrors type of thing. So I'm just going to read the quote, and then we'll go into the rest of this, which is kind of me jumping to conclusions to an extent, but also kind of trying to draw a logical line here based on what we've seen from Warner Brothers and from the various people from the Snyder Cut and all the other people that were involved with that, in addition to the original cut of Justice League and the investigation that is still ongoing, or ongoing from various sources. Let's put it that way. Reading this basically, and this is Zack Snyder speaking about his relationship with Warner Brothers during the production of the Snyder Cut. Now, not the original production of Justice League. We know a lot about the shit show that went down there. But this is during when they brought him back to do the Snyder Cut. Now, it is also important to note that Zack Snyder sacrificed a salary to make this film. He did not take any money to come back and do this. He did this. He did this completely free, and he came back and he made this film so that the fans could have this. Now that in and of itself is almost unheard of for a AAA budgeted film. Zack Snyder is a working director in Hollywood. He makes a good amount of money. His wife is a high-end editor in Hollywood as well. I'm sure they make a very good living, but still it is very rare to see them take gigs for free unless there is something in it for them. And in this case, aside from maybe some deal he made with Warner Brothers behind the scenes that we're not necessarily aware of for NDA reasons, he basically just did this for the fans. At least it looks like that from the outside looking in, and I wouldn't doubt it. He seems like a very nice man. But the point is that this is how he describes it. They're the ones that have been aggressive, not me. I haven't done anything. They've been very passive-aggressive. Every day they turn around and do some weird passive-aggressive thing. So I don't know. It's weird. So it feels like they almost resented having him there. And here's another full quote as well. It was cool to do the Snyder Cut of Justice League, and that was fun and everything, but Warner Bros. Still tortured me the whole time for whatever reason. They can't help it. I don't know why I'm such a fucking pain in their ass, because I'm not trying to be, honestly. Now, we know that there was a bit of back and forth as well, involving the removal of the Jon Stewart Green Lantern, which I think may have had something to do with their Green Lantern Corps show that they're developing for HBO Max, which I think was originally a film, and now they're kind of shifting it over into a television project or a streaming project. So it's possible it was tied up in that, so I don't necessarily blame them for saying, maybe keep that out just because we're thinking of doing this, which I understand, and maybe that information was not privy to Snyder during the process. So losing Green Lantern I don't think was a big thing for the movie, but gaining a lot of that other stuff back was. Gaining those existential characters, the characters that help the plot make fucking sense. That was what was more needed for the plot than a Green Lantern cameo, which we did get a different Green Lantern cameo at the beginning, even though we did kind of get that in the theatrical cut too, but not as much of one. But regardless, he's basically saying that they kind of resented having him there. Which I think is odd when you're doing something, when you supposedly are bringing somebody in to say, hey, we want to do something for these fans because they've been waiting for so long and they want this. It feels almost like their hand, it feels like their hand was forced. And here's the other thing, too, is that was kind of interesting. At the beginning, before we started having the Snyder Cut movement, was we had this whole thing where after after Justice League came out, the theatrical cut, we had a bunch of people asking, what was Zack Snyder's original cut of the film, because we knew that it had been re-edited by Whedon, and a lot of people could tell a lot of the scenes had been changed. We had the whole Cavill's mustache thing that was going on at the time as well, because he was contractually had to have that mustache for Mission Impossible for whatever fucking reason. So they had to spend another $2 million to CGI out the mustache for the reshoot scenes and stuff. There was a bunch of crap that went on with that production at the time. But the one thing that Warner Brothers was pretty adamant about, and most people that sided with Warner Brothers were very adamant about, was that the Snyder Cut of Justice League did not exist. We know that for a fact. That we know now for a fact that was a lie. We know that there was a rough cut of that movie that was almost complete, because supposedly they only spent about $20 to $30 million, I believe, finishing the movie, which is probably enough to kind of finish out and smooth over the third act effects and stuff like that for that film. But the majority of it seems to have been made and put together and put to film for the most part during that original production before Whedon came in and refilmed a bunch of it. And just the sheer amount that not only was changed, but what was added and or removed was staggering watching that film. So Warner Brothers has lied to us in the past, is basically what I'm saying, is that they have not been entirely truthful with people, and they've really only had to be truthful with people when their hand was forced. And that's the thing, is a lot of people that really supported Zack Snyder came out and said, no, his cut of the film does exist. I have personally seen it. People that have sided with him and people that have are friends of his, he was able to show them various cuts of it privately. I don't know exactly what stipulation that was under, but there were people that did see his version of the film before this finished version was released. I assume with not completed effects in certain scenes and stuff like that. So you had this movement that was saying, no, you're wrong. At the same time, the establishment, the studio, was saying that, no, this doesn't exist. And, of course, the people that were telling the truth wound up being right, and that's why we got the Snyder Cut. But the thing is that Warner Brothers has been trying to play this thing down since it released. They did do the advertising, which I think was something that was probably contractually agreed upon by Zack Snyder and Warner Brothers. But after this thing came out, you didn't really see a whole lot about it outside of people talking about it. There wasn't a lot of official media that was coming out at the time about, oh, hey, look, this hit, X amount of viewers on HBO Max, come watch it, or something like that. They just released it out to HBO Max. There were a few stories about the first day crashes on the site, where the site actually did crash multiple times the first day that the Snyder Cut was released on the site, because there were a lot of people that were watching it. We also got some fudgy numbers, too, because here's the other thing, is that unlike box office numbers, which I think a lot of people realize, is that box office is very transparent, because we can see what the numbers are. Now, whether or not those numbers are fudged from, the studios buying out seats or something like that, we've accused Disney and stuff of that before in the past. Unfortunately, we don't really have the physical evidence to back it up. We just have a lot of kind of intuition and kind of sketchy-looking stuff that went on. But regardless, you still have a record of how many tickets were bought and how much money was put towards that film. With streaming, you don't. With streaming, the best you can get from these companies is little tidbits here and there, and maybe a few numbers every once in a while. And most of that is the growth numbers that are involved with the growth numbers that are involved with the streaming service. Because the other thing we have to remember is that the Snyder Cut was specifically released on HBO Max. It was not released in theaters. Which, again, I think that was probably a good choice given the format that they chose to release it in. But at the same time, that means that we don't have a box office total like we do with Godzilla vs. Kong, or like what we had with Mortal Kombat. All we have are streaming numbers that are not public knowledge. So Warner Brothers has not come out and stated exactly what those numbers were, and in relation to other projects, how good it was. The only thing we have is their word saying that basically they attribute a lot of their, I think it would have been first quarter growth in 2021 to Godzilla vs. Kong at the end of the month. And I feel like this is kind of the situation where you're gauging the success of this film, or maybe not the success of the film, but how many people actually went and viewed it and wanted to view it differently than maybe you would if it was in theaters. Because in theaters, you pay and you see the movie. With streaming, you pay, you see the movie, and then you can very easily quit. You can just cancel the subscription and you don't have it anymore, or you can let it keep going and let it renew. Now, they credit, keep in mind, Godzilla vs. Kong was released on, I believe it was March 28th of this year, or 29th. The Snyder Cut was released on March 18th. So, you don't have a lot of time in between those two releases, maybe about 10 days. What probably happened? The Snyder Cut people, who hate Warner Brothers probably, by the way, the Snyder Cut people came out and they watched the movie, and that's why it crashed multiple times on the first day it was released. And I'm assuming that most of those hardcore Snyder fans probably watched that movie within the first week and then immediately canceled their accounts because they hate Warner Brothers as a studio for doing what they did to Snyder and what they did to that film. So if you're judging it by streaming numbers, the people that stuck around, I'm sure that, oh, we have this many subscribers for this month, but they already knew that half of those subscribers had probably canceled their memberships only a couple of days after making them. Which, again, Disney Plus had the same thing happen with The Mandalorian, except it was spread out because The Mandalorian was released in subsequent weeks like a traditional television show, which was Disney's way of basically stringing people along so that they would subscribe to the streaming service for 2 months instead of one, in case they were going to go with the Netflix method of just releasing it all at once. Which, again, a lot of people that like Netflix do the same thing. Oh, new season of Stranger Things. I'm going to subscribe to Netflix for a month, watch the season, and then cancel my subscription. You see it with online MMO games, too. It's the same kind of idea. So whether or not Warner Brothers was counting that, because the other thing is that I'm assuming because they were counting its success more or less on its growth margin for HBO Max, which I understand because it's specifically being released on HBO Max. That makes sense. But at the same time, they also have to understand their audience, and that's why I feel like this thing was more of a chore for them than anything else. They just wanted to get it out of the way so people would shut the fuck up about it, and they're not shutting the fuck up about it because it was actually good. Or at least it was a million times better. Even if you don't really like it, it was a million times better than the theatrical cut of the film, and that was the cut that we should have gotten in theaters. It probably should have been 2 films, again, like it was supposed to be originally. But this is just kind of my weird thing, is that Warner Brothers is trying to bury this thing because they don't want this to become the norm. They don't want it to become the norm where fans dictate what they want. The studio wants to dictate to the fans. That's how it's kind of always been to an extent with a lot of franchise movies, is the studio can listen to the fans, but a lot of the times they don't. A lot of the times they take their own ideas and they move forward with them and they say, oh, people are going to love this. This is such a good story. And then if you lean too much into the fans, if you get too fan servicey, then it starts getting a little hokey and corny and meta, and it doesn't really work as well. So you got to kind of find a little bit of an even balance, but I think Snyder found that balance with his cut of the film. I think that cut of the film is far, far superior, and I would very much like to own it on Blu-ray in the near future, and I probably will. But this is just kind of my dissection of these things, is that Warner Brothers is trying to bury this thing, and I hope that people do not let them bury this thing, because this is a very clear example of the fans getting a win when they deserve that win. And I don't think that should be erased or buried or forgotten. And I very much hope it doesn't, and I very much would like to have that movie on home video, and hopefully I will soon. But that's just kind of my feelings on these the quotes from Snyder, in addition to all the other stuff that we've gotten out of that production. You know, the stuff with Gal Gadot and the stuff with Ray Fisher. But I want to know what you think. Do you think that Warner Brothers is kind of trying to downplay this as much as possible? Do you think that what they're saying is true? Or do you think that maybe the reality of it lies kind of somewhere in the middle? You know, put your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?